Happy Monday. May the 4th be with you. It is Monday, May 4th of this beautiful 2020, and we are going to go ahead and get started. We are going to be talking about Shakespeare. Who exactly was the Bard of Avon? For this week, you will be looking more into the life of William Shakespeare. We will also be looking at famous lines from Shakespeare's legendary plays and using the method of diffusion. We will put his language into our own modern day English. And please remember that all assignments are due the following Monday, and of course, vocab won't be due until the following Tuesday. I would like you to pay close attention to our lesson today so you understand exactly what is expected of you. So I would like you to watch this video, and also, the video that I'm recording now will go here. But after you're done watching this Shakespeare video, it's a little bit about his life, very interesting. You will then go to your Springboard Activity 4.3. That's on page 263. If you cannot log into Springboard online, then please use the PDF version, Unit 4, that you can find on Google Classroom. Your learning targets are analyze information about Shakespeare and his society in response to research questions. You won't need to worry about the other two learning targets. I do want to review with you the strategy of diffusing. When we diffuse, that is when we use our context clues and we create the words in our own language so that way it's easier to understand, which is obviously something that we'll need to make sure we do with Shakespeare. In this activity, you will read an informational text and other sources to answer research questions. You won't be answering research questions. You will just answer a prompt today. So setting a purpose for reading. It says, as you read, underline words and phrases that answer the research question, who was Shakespeare? This is actually important. Even though you won't be answering research questions, I do want you to underline or highlight any details that explain who Shakespeare was. I'm going to turn this up so we hear. Okay. And also circle any unknown words and phrases so that way when you are coming across words that you don't understand, you could possibly use the strategy of diffusion, putting it into simpler terms so that way it makes sense. Okay. If you would like, I will press play and then you can read along or listen to Shakespeare's life. This is from the British Library.
Shakespeare's life from the British Library. The key dates: 1564, Shakespeare born in Stratford-upon-Avon. 1594, joins Lord Chamberlain's men, Titus Andronicus, first quarto published. 1599, Globe Playhouse built. 1603, death of Elizabeth I, accession of James I. 1613, Shakespeare's writing career over. 1616, Shakespeare dies in Stratford-upon-Avon. 1623, publication of the first folio. 1642, Civil War closes the theaters. 1660, theaters reopen with restoration of Charles II. 1769, Garrick's Shakespeare Jubilee in Stratford-upon-Avon. 1780, Garrick's Library arrives in British Museum. 1828, George III's library arrives in British Museum. 1858, quartos purchased from Halliwell Phillips. 2003, 93 British Library Shakespeare quartos digitized. 2009, digital Shakespeare quarto editions completed, 107 quartos in total. Who was William Shakespeare? Shakespeare was born in Stratford-upon-Avon, Warwickshire, in 1564. Very little is known about his life, but by 1592, he was in London working as an actor and a dramatist. Between about 1590 and 1613, Shakespeare wrote at least 37 plays and collaborated on several more. Many of these plays were very successful both at court and in the public playhouses. In 1613, Shakespeare retired from the theater and returned to Stratford-upon-Avon. He died and was buried there in 1616. What did he write? Shakespeare wrote plays and poems. His plays were comedies, histories, and tragedies. His 17 comedies include A Midsummer Night's Dream and The Merry Wives of Windsor. Among his 10 history plays are Henry V and Richard III. The most famous among his 10 tragedies are Hamlet, Othello, and King Lear. Shakespeare's best-known poems are the sonnets, first published in 1609. What are the quartos? Shakespeare's plays began to be printed in 1594, probably with his tragedy, Titus Andronicus. This appeared as a small, cheap pamphlet called a quarto because of the way it was printed. 18 of Shakespeare's plays had appeared in quarto editions by the time of his death in 1616. Another 3 plays were printed in quarto before 1642. In 1623, an expensive folio volume of 36 plays by Shakespeare was printed, which included most of those printed in quarto. Why are the quartos important? None of Shakespeare's manuscripts survives, so the printed texts of his plays are our only source for what he originally wrote. The quarto editions are the texts closest to Shakespeare's time. Some are thought to preserve either his working drafts, his foul papers, or his fair copies. Others are thought to record versions remembered by actors who performed the plays, providing information about staging practices in Shakespeare's day. Shakespeare in print. By the time Shakespeare began creating his plays, the London book trade was well established and growing steadily. Printing was regulated by the ecclesiastical authorities and the stationers' company, although the regulations were not always enforced. The printers, booksellers, and publishers who ran London's book trade were almost all stationers. Printed plays formed a very small part of the book trade. Relatively few plays got into print. They did not sell in large numbers and were not particularly profitable. The companies of players were not necessarily reluctant to have their plays printed, but the uncertainty of profits may well have deterred publishers. The dramatists themselves were unlikely to make money from the printing of their plays. There was no law of copyright to protect their interests. Once a manuscript play had been sold to a publisher and he had paid for its approval and licensing for printing, he had sole rights over the work. Several of Shakespeare's plays, including Richard II and Richard III, were popular enough to be printed in several editions. From 1598, with Love's Labour's Lost, his name began to be added to their title pages as a selling point. Scholars have long held that Shakespeare had no interest in the printing of his plays, but this is now being challenged. Shakespeare's theater. Shakespeare began his career not long after the first public playhouses were established in London. His earliest plays were given at the theater, an open-air playhouse in Shoreditch. Many of his plays were written for the Globe, rebuilt from the timbers of the theater on Bankside. A number of Shakespeare's later plays were created for the very different surroundings of the indoor playhouse at Blackfriars. Shakespeare, a player as well as a dramatist, belonged to a company of players. His company, the Lord Chamberlain's Men, from 1603 the King's Men, competed with others, notably the Admiral's Men, for audiences. Like most leading players, Shakespeare was a sharer in his company and was able to enjoy its profits. He also had to suffer its losses. For example, when the first Globe burnt down in 1613. His plays were created with his company's players in mind. Such players as the tragedian Richard Burbage and clowns like William Kemp influenced the roles within Shakespeare's plays. Shakespeare's theater came to an end in 1642. In that year, on the eve of the Civil War, all the playhouses were closed by order of Parliament. Those which were still structurally sound were either converted into dwellings or demolished so that their timbers could be reused elsewhere. The players could no longer perform their plays in public.
All right. So I do want to point out that the Civil War they're talking about is not the Civil War of the United States, and there weren't even United States really when we were having the Civil War, not like that anyway. But this is the Civil War in London, or in England, the United Kingdom. And so this does kind of give a little bit of a picture. This was the this is a depicted picture of Shakespeare being on stage of his latest play, and it's an open air playhouse, as you can see, and it could fit up to 3,000 people. That's a lot of people. So the next thing that you're actually going to do, you're not even going to worry about anything else besides the reading on this page. I have provided for you your document. You are going to create 2 paragraphs to answer this prompt. Write what you found most interesting about Shakespeare. Cite details from the video and from your springboard reading to support your answer. I want to see video details cited and also springboard details cited. You will just type your answer here. You will change this to Times New Roman and 12-point font. And then you will double space. All right. That is going to be your lesson for today. And it will give you here also explain, move my face out the way. And it will explain here as well. Good luck, guys.